Okay, we had a good time making an ice cream cone-esque figure. I'm going to add a couple objects. One is going to be a cube, and the other will be a UV sphere, which is different from our icosphere in that it has lots of facets. I'm going to actually go back and add that UV sphere again. I'm going to move the cube off of the spot. I'm going to take this UV sphere and delete it because I want to add my UV sphere and I want to modify that sphere. The only time I can do that is right after I've placed it. I mean, not the only time, but the best time. So I can change how many segments I have, which increases the complexity of the sphere. So when my final render, this will look smoother than when I had fewer. Now, if I go to move my sphere, I don't have that same option menu that I did when I first placed it. Cool. Oopsie doops. Okay, so I have my two objects. I have been heretofore using the object mode in Blender, but we are going to jump into the edit mode. The edit mode is more granular and really lets you get in to adjust each object specifically. To do so, I'm going to click on my drop down to edit mode, and whatever object I have selected in object mode is the one that I can edit in edit mode. A couple things, we still have our menu items over here, but this is a new menu that only comes up when you are in edit mode. Right now I can use my move tool and I can grab some specific things. I could grab this vertices on this cube, or if I wanted to, I could grab the face, this face, but to do so, I would need to let Blender know what I want. And here we have select vertices, select edges, and select face. I've changed it to face, and now when I click on here, I have this option to adjust and modify this face on this cube. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like to modify an edge. Okay, great. So we can really get in here and do some more granular editing. We can really make these objects our own. I'm going to jump out of edit mode into object mode, and I'm going to select my sphere, and we'll talk about why later. And I'm going to go into edit mode with spheres, my sphere, because I have my edges selected. It has, when I go through my sphere, I can select an edge and modify it. Ooh, cool, whoa, look at that. I was messing around and inadvertently selected an edge and modified it. I'm going to do undo to clean this up a little bit. I can also choose a vertices to select and modify. Ooh, cool, look at that, that's cool. And I, of course, can select a face to modify and edit. So I can really get in there and be specific about how I work with my edited object. A couple things. Sometimes it's hard to just pick one vertices to edit. There is an awesome tool where you can click C on your keyboard and you get this almost like a selection brush. And now you can roll over your object, and that means that you've selected all those vertices. I can hold the shift key down and erase some if I went too nuts with what I selected. And then I need to hit the escape key before selecting my move tool and moving my objects. Otherwise, if I just went straight to the move, it would still be that the C. You can use the C key with the G key. So I'm going to go back into my object, deselect, go to my C key, highlight some, then I'm going to hit my G key. I have to hit escape and then hit my G key, and that really lets me grab this. It's very helpful for selection of large objects, not so much little tiny UV spheres. Okay, that's pretty cool, and you could see maybe why you would want to get in there with some with some specific actions. You can rotate You can scale. You can do all of these cool things in your objects. It's pretty useful. I'm actually going to go back to object mode, and I'm going to delete this monstrosity, and I'm going to add another UV sphere. I'm going to increase its segments and rings, excuse me, and then I'm going to jump into edit mode. And in edit mode, I'm going to go to the edge tool, and as I showed you before, I can click one edge and modify that edge if I want to. But what becomes more helpful is when you click on an edge and that edge allows you to select the entire ring or loop. Let me show. I can hold down my Option key, and it would be your Alt key on PCs. And I'm going to select one edge here. And when I hold down my Option or Alt key, it selects the entire ring or loop. Here I can scale this loop up, and I can modify it, and it allows for some pretty sophisticated things. Then I get my loop, then I'm going to scale it up, and then I'm going to move it, and I could even rotate it if I wanted to. And now I have an interesting object. I did the rings where now I can do the edges from top to bottom. So I've done that. I'll go ahead and scale it. And then that's good. Cool. Awesome. Kind of more useful than what I was showing you before. In addition to that, there are some other cool tools. By the way, this black thing here is the camera. We're actually in the end going to delete the camera from our Blender file before we take it into Unity, but I'll have a whole lecture on how to move from Blender to Unity. I'm going to go back into edit mode and choose object. I'm sorry, I went to object mode, choose my, it's not a cube anymore, and I'm going to jump into edit mode. I'm going to actually choose face select, and I'm going to select a face here. And what I'd like to do is I want to extrude that face. So when I click the face and then hit extrude, I get this plus sign, and that allows me to take that particular section and pull it out. Let's try extrude again. I'm going to select a different face and pull that one out. And you can really start to build your object in this way. Maybe I don't want to extrude anymore, but I would like to have an inset face. So here, what happens is I can decide, okay, I want not the same rectangle, but a smaller one, and then I'm going to go through and extrude that. Okay, so that was an inset face, and then extrude. Cool. Let's do that again. I'll select another face, and I'll do an inset face, and another inset face, and another inset face, and another inset face. And actually here I'm just going to move it out on the x-axis, and then I can select even just parts of these faces if I want. So that gets pretty sophisticated. Awesome. I'm going to break with convention and add a cube while I'm in edit mode. Things behave differently when you do this, so yeah, just be aware. This cube I'm going to highlight with my move tool. It's allowing me to highlight faces. Whoopsie-doops. I'm actually going to use the loop cut tool, and this isn't, perhaps you were thinking, oh, this is how you would cut the cube. It isn't how you cut the cube, but it's a way of adding more vertices, edges, and faces to your object. So that now I can go to the move tool, and if I have my faces selected, I can click in here and then I can move just one particular part. Hey, my computer crashed, so I had to recreate a little bit of our scene that we were working on. Just to get you caught up, I'm in object mode. I have two objects, a sphere and a mutated cube. And I'm going to go into edit mode. And in edit mode, we will continue to explore our tools. I was showing you how I added a mesh in edit mode, this cube here, for example. And I told you it behaves differently than when you add it in object mode. And I want to just show you what I mean by that. First and foremost, I'm going to go back into object mode and look what happens. If I select one of these objects, it selects both. As opposed to selecting the sphere, which I created in object mode. This cube is a subset of this one. Forever they are linked now. You may or may not want that in when you develop something. A couple other things. While I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and delete the light and camera. Again, we will have a light and camera in Unity, and we just want to bring the bare essentials from Blender over to Unity. By the way, you'll also notice the scene collection. It's the objects that are in the scene, and look how it says cube. It doesn't say cube with two cubes. It just says one, and that's because, again, when we were in edit mode, I created this second cube. We were messing around with the loop cut, and now we want to do the offset edge loop cut. To use that, I need to have my edges highlighted. Click on the edge, then I go to the offset edge loop cut. And as I click and drag, it gives me these offsets, right? So I can get really jazzy in terms of how I dissect this cube. And again, I can go to faces and then I can pull just one thing out. And I'm sure you can imagine all the flexibilities and options that doing such a thing offers. Cool. We are not finished yet. I'm actually going to go back to object mode and I'm going to add another mesh of a cube. And I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut G, which allows me to move my object. I'm going to scale it. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut S. The big deal is the moment I hit my keyboard shortcut, I need to apply whatever it is that I'm doing. So G moves it. It operates differently than when I select these, and sometimes for my own sanity and out of habit, I select the tools here. Yeah, cool. I'm going to go into edit mode. And here is the knife tool, which is kind of interesting. These other tools that we've been using so far, the loop cut and offset loop cut, are pretty regimented, right? They're straight lines. The knife tool allows you to create the same polygonal viewports, but it can be all crazy like. Oh, great. And when I'm finished, I'm going to double click. Nope. I'm going to hit return, and then I have these wackadoodle interfaces. So I'll go return, and then I can go up to faces, and I can go to move, and then I can select this really weird face that I made. Now, it needs to be visible, like it needs to be a face that's visible for you to use. I would have to go through and add to these other faces as necessary. But you can, again, get some complexity. Awesome possum. Let's say that I've made all of these groovy vertices, but I don't love them. You know, I really wish that I could get rid of them. I could possibly, I'm going to use my C tool to select a bunch. I could go X on my keyboard and I could delete vertices, but then I get a hole, right? I wanted that face there. I just wanted to get rid of my vertices. The other option, and the more reasonable one, is to hit X and dissolve the vertices. It gets rid of those vertices that I had on there and leaves the plane or the face that I want to still leave there. Anyway, so that's X, dissolve vertices. Now I want to be careful because I need this vertices here, this vertex, just kidding, because that is part of my cube. If I delete these vertices, or even if I dissolve them, it's kind of wackadoodle, right? I don't necessarily want that. So what I'm going to do actually is not dissolve the vertices, but I'm actually going to go to these edges. And I'm going to choose to hit X, dissolve edges. All right, now we're in business here. Great. Great. I'm going to actually go back to object mode, and I'm going to add a cylinder this time. And I'll get that going where I want to go it. Why don't I just grab it? I don't know. Then I'm going to go to edit mode because underneath the knife tool is the bisect tool. And the bisect allows you to cut across your object. It gives you some other options. I'll show you too, but I'll hit return, and you should know that part of the bisect tool, you can decide whether you want to clear the inner half or the outer half, or I don't know what fill is. Great. Let's do clear inner, and then I have, let's say I have this tool exactly how I wanted it. Let's go through that again. I'm going to undo a bunch of times. What if I'm in edit mode and nothing is selected, and I go to use my bisect tool? It doesn't know what I want cut, right? If I have just this edge, then it will only cut that edge. So in my case, I wanted this whole shenanigans to be selected. So I'm going to go to my selection tool and select all of this. Actually, I'm going to go over here, up in here, and select all that. Cool. Oh boy, look, I missed some. I'm going to select all this. And cool. Wait a minute. It's not selecting the other side. What am I going to do? Well, actually, there's a pretty cool option here called wireframe or view up, blah, 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 viewport shading. But when I convert this to a wireframe, I can actually see through the cylinder to the other side, and it allows me to select this whole object like I was talking about before. Okay, I jumped back into this viewport shading, which makes it look more in that 3D. Again, this is, I feel like this should say wireframe something or other, but whatever. Okay, cool, whatever. So this allows me to select everything all at once. I'm just going to go back to this viewport shader, blah. Now I can go into my bisect and cut that. Now I raced through last time. These controls around the bisect tool allow me to make some changes to my original selection for how I'm going to cut it. And it's pretty useful, and you can go nuts with it if you like. Then the big thing is, in this case, you really need this menu, this contextual menu, to decide what it is that you're going to cut. Oh, here's fill. I wanted it filled. I did not realize that it was not filled earlier. Okay, great. Now I have this cool thing, and if I go back to object mode, there it is. It exists. Okay, we have a couple more cool things to do in our edit mode. We have poly build and spin, smooth, edge slide, shrink, fatten, shear. I'm going to go through poly build and spin. just to get you started because we've still got to do sculpt and time's a wasting. I will go ahead and in object mode add a plane. A plane is a flat non-dimensional surface, and this plane is going to give me the start that I need to use this polybuild function. The polybuild function is basically a quick and easy way to add materials to your original mesh. So for instance, if I choose faces, any place that I click on here, I can add a face, right? And then I can take this face once I've added it, and I can rotate it. It's basically kind of like freehand drawing with edges, vertices, and faces. I'm going to try, I was just clicking before thoughtlessly because I was busy talking, but I would want to click and drag and formulate my shapes as necessary. This one, you really got to rotate around, man, because what do you know what you're doing? You don't know what you're doing. You can't see. You're just goofing off here. Perhaps I'm talking about myself. Cool. It's actually a really amazing tool, and people usually have a base that they operate off of, and then they add complexity doing this. All right, great. That was cool, and you could imagine how useful it would be. And then this, what I want to do is I want to draw from this plane and curve out, making almost what looks like a HVAC air duct. The big thing is it will draw it depending on from what vantage point I'm looking at. So if I did spin right now, it would be totally janky because I have this weird perspective. So I'm actually going to change my viewport. Viewpoint, right. Here is my plane. It has no depth. So I see it here, it has no depth. I'm going to use this spin, and how I use this spin is I decide which way it's stretching using this very handy dandy compass. And I can mess with my object now, and now when I go back into the local view, I have my plane that's been spun out. Let's do that again. Whee! Ooh! Wow! Let's do that again. What if it's not a plane? What if we go back to object mode and we add a mesh that's a circle? Again, it has no content in it. And normally you wouldn't have so many objects already on your surface or your scene. Again, I'm going to go to View, Viewport, Front, and now I'm going to go into Edit Mode, and then I'm going to do Spin again.